Ladies and gentlemen, this is TVP World. You're watching another edition of Break the Fake, where we debunk fake news and combat false narratives. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and let's get rolling. Now, word on the internet is Poland is about to yank visa-free travel for Ukrainians. Now, let's break that fake. This whole thing started because one Polish MP made a comment about tightening migration. One guy, not the government, not a policy, not even a bill, just an opinion. And suddenly the rumor mill went full turbo. Poland shuts doors on Ukraine. Now here's the problem. Poland can't even do that. Visa-free access for Ukrainians is an EU-level agreement. It takes all Schengen countries to approve any suspension, and spoiler, there's no such proposal on the table. None. Now, it is true that Poland is reviewing visa-free agreements for a few countries: Colombia, Georgia, Armenia, Venezuela. But Ukraine, not mentioned, not listed, not even whispered in the hallway. True, the EU updated its rules in June. There's now a mechanism to suspend visa-free regimes if there's irregular migration, document fraud, or hybrid threats. But that's a general tool. Think of it as a fire extinguisher and not a blowtorch. And Ukraine isn't anywhere near the flames. So, where did this rumor come from? Easy. It's designed to sound just credible enough. EU rule changes, Polish migration talk, one MP with a Slavic last name says Ukraine in a sentence, and boom, Moscow's favorite bedtime story hits the feed. This is what disinfo looks like. Take a sliver of truth, wrap it in context-free panic, and feed it to an already anxious and tired audience. Doesn't have to be true, just has to spread. Even the MP who sparked this mess admit that nothing's happening. The Polish government isn't touching Ukraine's visa-free status, so let's not confuse one politician's hot take with actual policy. That's not analysis, it's clickbait. And in geopolitics, clickbait gets weaponized. Visa-free travel for Ukrainians is alive and well. The only thing that's been suspended is reality, for anyone still pushing this nonsense. Staying on the topic of migration, according to Russia's chief propagandist Olga Skabyeva, everyone wants to live in Russia. German, most of all. Looks like April Fool's Day came early. Skabyeva insists that Germans are sick of LGBT rights, green energy, and are yearning for what she calls traditional values. Now, surprise, surprise, this fantasy has zero basis in reality. Migration from Germany to Russia, especially since the start of the full-scale war began, is microscopic, mostly limited to one-off repatriations or the odd economic move. In fact, the real migration trend is the opposite. People are leaving Russia in droves to avoid being sent to Ukraine and treated like cannon fodder in a suicidal assault on some village whose name a few people can pronounce.
Граждане Германии в числе лидеров по эмиграции из Европы. В Россию вы не поверите. С начала действия программы «Виза за общие ценности» Германия оказалась на первом месте по числу заявителей. 224 человека. Это почти каждый пятый из всех подавших заявки. Большинство – консервативно настроенные граждане, разочарованные политикой Берлина, миграционным кризисом, ЛГБТ-пропагандой в школах, зеленой энергетикой, которая ведет к росту цен. Особый интерес к России проявляют немцы из восточных, конечно, земель, бывшей ГДР. Некоторые до сих пор говорят там по-русски и поддерживают связи с Россией. Россия предлагает трехлетнее проживание без языковых тестов и сложных условий. Только признание традиционных ценностей.
Well, so much for Skabyeva's fairy tale about Germans rushing to live in Russia. Even Moscow's much-hyped shared values visa, designed for conservatives from abroad, attracted only around 224 applicants from Germany in nearly a year. Meanwhile, since the full-scale invasion, over 650,000 Russians have fled the country to avoid repression or mobilization, with Germany alone seeing more than 7,600 new asylum applications from Russian citizens in 2023. In other words, people aren't queuing to get in, they're running to get out. Now, more on these traditional values. Russia is at it again, waging a holy war against cinema. The Kremlin just passed a shiny new law banning films that discredit traditional spiritual and moral values. Which is funny, because if there's one thing Russia excels at, it is discrediting morality without the help of movies. Effective immediately if your film doesn't align with the regime's idea of tradition is gone. No theater run, no streaming releases, no TikTok clip, yet vaporized. The official line? It's about defending morality, preserving culture, shielding innocent Russian eyes from the corrupting filth of Western decadence. Putin wants us to believe he's the last line of defense for Christian civilization, standing firm as the West spirals into rainbow-colored chaos. He's Moses descending from the mountain, not with commandments, but with censorship. But let's take a quick detour through reality, shall we? Russia has one of the highest abortion rates in the world, like Olympic level high. You think a country so obsessed with the sanctity of life would maybe, I don't know, notice that? The Orthodox Church top brass live in mansions with gold faucets while sermonizing about humanity. And Vladimir, defender of the Christian value Putin, well, this paragon of virtue once signed a law that made it illegal to evangelize anywhere except in a state-sanctioned church, because nothing screams religious freedom like needing Kremlin permission to talk about Jesus. So let's stop pretending that this is about values. See, this law isn't really aimed at sex scenes or foul language, it's aimed at ideas. It's a muzzle disguised as rosary. The Kremlin doesn't fear nudity, it fears narrative. Stories that question power, character who breaks molds, stories that hint there might be another way to live. This law isn't about protecting tradition, it's about monopoly. The state wants sole custody of your conscience, and once that's done, you're silenced. Because in Putin's Russia, values aren't values, they're weapons, and the truth, that's the first thing banned in the box office. Welcome to the Russian Mir, where one of Ukraine's most industrialized cities has been turned into a dust-dry disaster zone. In occupied Donetsk, water flows once every 3 days, prices for a bottle could bankrupt you, and people line up for hours in the heat while chickens drop dead from thirst. And this isn't a freak accident, it's policy. Moscow's troops blew up the pipes and left the infrastructure in ruins during their attack in these regions. Since the occupation began, Denis Putin and other Putin's puppets ignored the problem, and now 1.7 million people are left with no access to water. Now in the clip you're about to see, the meeting between Putin and Putin began with a traditional and then the dictator and his henchmen move on to discuss the water supply crisis, and of course, who else but Ukraine was blamed. The official line? Kyiv allegedly hadn't repaired the pipes for decades.
К сожалению, водовод, который был построен, не решает всех задач, и более того, он на плановый режим-то и не вышел пока, насколько я понимаю. Но есть и другая проблема, о которой мне правительство докладывает. Большие потери воды, так сказать, перемещение этих ресурсов.
Водопотери доходят местами до 60%.
Почему?
Владимир Владимирович, первая причина, мы сейчас вынуждены были сократить еще график, исходя из дефицита воды. У нас в Донецко-Макеевской агломерации сейчас раз в 3 дня на несколько часов подается вода. В Янакиево и группе городов близлежащих раз в 4 дня, в Мариуполе раз в 2 дня. Такой график, к сожалению, увеличивает износ сетей. Мы ремонтируем, ежедневно устраняется 100 порывов.
If Russia can't guarantee clean water and reliable heating to its own citizens, well, with 40% of surface water failing basic safety standards, up to 55% of samples in some regions contaminated with bacteria, nearly 30% of households still lacking proper sanitation, what chances do occupied regions have? Even in the capital, up to 60% of drinking water reserves exceed safe levels for heavy metals. Winter after winter, failing infrastructure leave thousands freezing in Moscow suburbs, as happened in Klimovsk and Podolsk in 2024, where heating and hot water were out for up to 6 days. Yeah, I'm sure people are just thrilled to move there. And with that, we conclude this edition of Break the Fake. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to DVP World.